The morning started like many others, slow and quiet, the kind of morning where even the air felt tired. The small room she lived in held the smell of old walls and yesterday's tea. A thin curtain moved slightly near the window, letting in soft light that showed how little there was inside the space. One bed, one chair, a small stove in the corner, and a few carefully folded clothes. Nothing more. She woke before her mother, not because she had to, but because hunger did not let her sleep long. It was a familiar feeling now. Not sharp like pain, but heavy and empty at the same time. She sat up slowly, listening to the silence around her. Outside, the world was already moving. Distant traffic, footsteps, someone calling out to sell bread. Life continued even when her own felt paused. Her mother slept facing the wall, exhausted from long hours of work that never seemed to be enough. The girl watched her for a moment. There was love there, deep and quiet, but also worry that never left. She understood more than people thought. She knew when money was short. She knew when her mother skipped meals so she could eat. And lately, even that balance was becoming difficult. She moved quietly, washed her face with cool water and stepped outside. The street was narrow, filled with familiar faces who were all busy surviving their own days. She walked without a clear destination. Walking helped ignore hunger for a while. It also allowed her to listen. Music had always been something she listened for. Not songs on the radio alone, but any sound that felt organized. Footsteps in rhythm, spoons tapping cups, distant instruments from passing vehicles. But nothing pulled her the way a piano did. The first time she heard one, she had stopped completely. The sound was different from everything else. Felt wide, like a story without words. She did not understand how someone could create so many emotions using only keys. Since then, whenever she heard that sound, she followed it. She never owned a piano. She never even touched one for years. But that did not stop her from learning in her own strange way. She watched. She listened. She memorized patterns. At home, she practiced on the edge of tables, pressing invisible keys, imagining the sound that should follow. Sometimes people noticed and smiled. Sometimes they ignored her. It did not matter. The piano existed in her mind even when it was not in front of her. That morning, her steps carried her farther than usual. The hunger was stronger, but so was the need to distract herself. She passed shops opening their shutters, children rushing to school, and workers carrying tools. The smell of food drifted through the air, making her swallow quietly. She did not stop. Looking too long only made it harder. Then she heard it. Soft at first. A few notes floating out through an open door. Not loud. Not perfect. But clear enough to stop her steps instantly. Her head turned before she even realized it. The sound came from a small cafe she had passed before but never entered. Near the window sat a piano. Not new, not shiny, but real. Someone had been playing earlier, maybe a staff member or a visitor. Now the seat was empty, but the lid was open, as if the music had just stepped away for a moment. She stood outside longer than she planned. People moved around her, some entering, some leaving, but she remained still. The piano looked both close and unreachable at the same time. That feeling was familiar, wanting something deeply but believing it was not meant for you. Her stomach tightened again. She tried to ignore it, but this time it came with a thought she could not push away. Food and music stood in the same place. A strange combination, yet somehow connected in that moment. She hesitated at the door. Her mind filled with reasons to leave. People would stare. They might laugh. They might ask questions she did not know how to answer. But another thought stayed stronger. If she walked away now, nothing would change. It would be another day of imagining instead of trying. So she stepped inside. The cafe was warm compared to the street. Conversations filled the space, cups clinked softly, and the smell of fresh food wrapped around her like something distant yet familiar. She kept her eyes low at first, unsure where to stand. No one paid much attention. She was just another quiet presence. But the piano stood there, impossible to ignore. Her heart beat faster as she approached the counter. The words felt heavy in her throat. Asking for help was never easy. Asking for something unusual felt even harder. She almost turned back. Then hunger reminded her why she was there. Her voice was soft when she spoke. Careful. Respectful. She asked if she could perform on the piano in exchange for a piece of food. For a second, the person behind the counter did not react, as if the request needed time to make sense. Then a small laugh escaped. Not cruel at first, just surprised. A few nearby customers heard and looked over. Curiosity spread quickly. Some smiles appeared. Some whispers followed. To them, it sounded like a child's idea, something unrealistic. A girl with simple clothes, asking to play a piano like it was an ordinary thing. She felt the heat rise to her face. This was the moment she feared. The space between courage and embarrassment is very small, and she stood right in it. Her fingers tightened slightly, ready to step back and pretend she had said nothing. But she did not leave. She repeated the request, still gentle, still polite. There was no anger in her voice, only honesty. That changed something. The laughter softened. Not belief yet, but curiosity grew stronger than dismissal. Someone shrugged and said it wouldn't hurt to let her try. Maybe they expected a few random notes, something quick before returning to normal conversation. The decision felt casual to them, but to her it felt enormous. She walked toward the piano slowly, aware of every step. The seat felt unfamiliar when she sat down. Up close, the keys looked both beautiful and intimidating. Real keys, real sound waiting. Her hands hovered above them for a moment. They trembled slightly, not because she didn't know what to do, but because this was different from imagining. Imagination is safe. Reality listens. The noise in the cafe faded in her mind. Hunger faded too. There was only breath, memory, and the quiet promise she had made to herself years ago, that if she ever got the chance, she would not waste it. Her fingers touched the keys. The first note was soft, almost careful, like knocking on a door. The second followed with more certainty. Then another. The pattern formed slowly, not rushed, not showy. Just honest sound. People kept talking at first. Cups moved. Chairs scraped. But music has a way of asking for attention without demanding it. One conversation paused. Then another. Heads turned gradually. Her hands moved with a familiarity that did not come from formal lessons but from long observation and silent practice. She was not thinking about technique. She was thinking about feeling. The quiet mornings, the empty stomach, her mother's tired smile, the moments of listening outside closed doors. All of that lived inside the notes. She did not look at the room. She rarely looked up when she played, even in her imagination. The piano was a place where she did not need permission to exist. Each sound carried something she could not explain with words. Some customers leaned forward. Others stopped eating. The earlier laughter faded into stillness that felt heavier than noise. Surprise moved through the room quietly. She kept playing, not to impress, not to prove, but because stopping felt harder than continuing. Music filled the space where hunger had been earlier. For a few minutes, she was not the girl asking for food. She was simply someone telling a story through sound. And without realizing it, the room was listening. The first note lingered in the air, soft and pure. Then another followed, each one building quietly but surely. People in the cafe froze mid-motion. Cups hovered near lips. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. And the soft scraping of chairs faded into nothing. No one expected much when she had asked, only a few random sounds, maybe a clumsy attempt at making music. But this was different. This was real. Her hands moved across the keys like they belonged there. Each press was precise, yet full of emotion, carrying more than melody. It carried longing, hunger, quiet desperation, and hope all at once. The people who had laughed before now looked in disbelief. They whispered to each other, not wanting to break the spell the music had created. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Not because she was shy, but because the sound needed focus. Every note required attention. Every movement demanded care. She had imagined this moment countless times, standing in front of a piano, sharing the music that lived inside her. Yet reality was stronger than imagination. It was heavier, deeper, almost alive. And it responded to her. A small crowd began to gather. Some were regular customers who had come in for breakfast. Some were people walking past, drawn by the strange and beautiful sound. They had no idea she was there until the music carried out to the street. Some phones appeared, not as a distraction but as a way to capture what they felt was impossible to believe. A girl, young and seemingly ordinary, playing a piano like a professional, like she had been born with it inside her. She didn't pause. She didn't look at the cameras, at the people, at the small crowd that had formed. Her focus remained on the piano. Every note mattered. Every pause had meaning. She played with intensity, yet with softness, as if the keys themselves could understand her story. She was telling something without words, something no one could ignore if they really listened. A man sitting at a table near the counter leaned forward, his face changing from amusement to astonishment. He had played the piano himself for years, thought he knew music, but what he heard was beyond skill. It was emotion, raw and true, the kind that could touch a person unexpectedly. He whispered to the person beside him, unable to contain disbelief. "Where did she learn to play like that?" he asked. But no one had an answer. She had learned in secret, in quiet corners, in moments stolen from life's harsh demands. Her stomach growled softly, reminding her why she had come. Yet she did not falter. Music had become stronger than hunger for these few minutes. She had asked for a piece of food, and now she was giving something far greater in return. Something invisible yet undeniable. Something that could not be bought or sold. Her gift was intangible, yet it moved everyone in the room. The cafe owner, who had laughed at the request, now watched with wide eyes. He had expected nothing, maybe a few awkward notes, but instead, he witnessed something extraordinary. His hands rested on the counter, trembling slightly, because the room had changed. Felt larger, softer, yet more alive. Something that belonged to the girl, yet touched everyone present. He could not believe he had almost dismissed her, almost sent her away without listening. People began to whisper again, quieter this time, full of wonder instead of amusement. Some faces showed tears, others a stunned smile. It was not just skill. It was the honesty in her playing. People could feel it. She had not learned for fame or recognition, had not practiced to impress. She had played from the heart, from experiences no one else knew, from hunger, from longing, from a desire to be seen. That honesty spoke louder than any formal training. A young boy sat cross-legged on the floor near the piano, watching her closely. He had never seen anyone play like that before. He pressed his palms together and leaned closer, fascinated. He could feel the music in his chest, in his bones. It seemed bigger than the room, bigger than the cafe. He wanted to remember every single note, every pause, every movement of her fingers. He knew he was witnessing something rare, a moment that would stay with him forever. The girl played on. She noticed nothing outside her focus. Each note connected to the last like threads of a story no one had read before. The piano was no longer just wood and keys. It was a bridge between her world and theirs, between silence and understanding, between hunger and hope. She had asked for food, but what she gave was far more valuable. A moment of truth, of art, of shared humanity. After a while, the crowd began to settle, realizing the performance was not ending. Some held their breath, waiting. Some were silent, eyes fixed on her hands, on the way she moved with such calm intensity. She did not rush, did not exaggerate. She let the music breathe, let it speak naturally, let it reveal itself slowly. That restraint, that quiet confidence, made it feel even more powerful. It was not performance for attention. It was expression for life itself. The cafe owner finally stepped forward, holding a small plate of food. He placed it carefully beside her, not wanting to break the spell. She looked down briefly, nodded softly in thanks, but did not pause her playing. The gesture was small, but it carried respect, acknowledgement, and a silent apology for the earlier laughter. The music continued to fill the room, carrying her story further than words could ever reach. Someone whispered from the corner, "She is more than a girl playing the piano. She is telling everything we cannot say." The statement was true. Every emotion she had stored inside, every moment of struggle, every time she had imagined a piano in her mind, every quiet day of longing, came together in this music. People listened, not just to notes, but to life itself, carried on her hands. The sounds of the cafe, clinking cups, chatter, footsteps, faded almost entirely, replaced by her melody. Even the regular staff paused to watch. She had turned the ordinary morning into something extraordinary. Every person present could feel it in their chest. Some faces were wet with quiet tears, some smiled as though understanding something they had never realized, and some just sat, astonished, unable to speak. It was a rare combination of talent and truth that could not be ignored. Her mind briefly wandered to her mother, imagining the tired face she would see later, wondering if she could share this moment at home. But there was no time for that now. Music was here and now, and she belonged to it fully. For these minutes, she had control over something. She had power in a world that often made her feel powerless. The piano had become a voice she never had to hide. When she finally lifted her hands, the room remained silent for a moment, caught between disbelief and awe. The magic of the moment hung thick, almost as if time itself had paused. Then, slowly, small claps began, growing louder as more people joined. Some were quiet, respectful, others enthusiastic. She nodded slightly, a small, humble gesture, and stepped back from the piano. The spell had been broken, but the feeling lingered, heavier than any applause could measure. The plate of food beside her was almost unnecessary now. She smiled softly, knowing she had already received something far more important than a meal. She had received acknowledgement. People had seen her, heard her, and had responded with genuine emotion. That was a rare gift, and for the first time in a long time she felt recognized. Not for asking, not for pleading, not for attention, but for who she was and what she could do. As the crowd dispersed, some lingering for a few moments to watch her leave, she gathered herself quietly. Phones were still recording, people were still talking, but it did not bother her. She had shared her story without words, through something far stronger than speech. The music had carried her voice where words would have failed, and that voice would not be forgotten. Even strangers would remember it. She walked toward the door, her stomach still reminding her of hunger, but her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The cafe had offered more than food. It had offered a space where she could exist without judgment, where her talent could speak louder than circumstances, where one moment could change how people saw her and how she saw herself. She stepped back onto the street, carrying the music with her, ready to face another day, knowing that sometimes, even a small chance could create something extraordinary. After that morning in the cafe, life changed in ways she had never expected. The video of her playing had spread quickly. Phones captured every detail. The way her fingers moved, the emotion in each note, the humility in her posture. People shared it online, amazed that someone so young, so ordinary in appearance, could play with such depth. Messages started coming from strangers, some praising her talent, some offering help, others just curious to know more. It was overwhelming, but it also felt strange. She had only wanted a small piece of food that morning. She had not imagined that asking to play would reach so many people. Her mother noticed the change first. She had seen the video before she had a chance to speak with her daughter. At first, she was quiet, just watching her child on a screen, playing with intensity and grace. Then came tears, both from pride and from relief. She had always known her daughter was special, had always sensed the passion for music, but she never thought it could be seen, really seen by the world. She didn't say much at first, only held her daughter a little longer than usual. That embrace carried years of worry, of struggle, of quiet sacrifices, and a hope that now had a new shape. People started calling the cafe asking for her. They wanted to know if she would come back, if she could perform again. The staff recognized her immediately. The memory of laughter followed by awe was still fresh. They remembered how her request had been treated lightly at first and how it had completely changed the room. It became a story they told often, how the girl who had only wanted food had created something unforgettable. Customers talked about it for weeks. Some came back just to see if she might return. The cafe, which had been ordinary before, now held a quiet fame. A local musician reached out, offering lessons and guidance. They had seen the video and wanted to help nurture the talent they had stumbled upon. First, she was cautious. People had been kind before but also dismissive. She did not want to be used or treated like a spectacle. She had always wanted music to be pure, a personal expression, not a tool for others' gain. But the musicians seemed sincere. They met in the cafe again, this time with a soft piano waiting. She played more out of habit than obligation. The musician listened quietly, not interrupting, not praising too much. When she finished, they nodded and said simply, "There is something rare here. I can help you make it stronger if you want." Those words felt like a bridge to a world she had never imagined. Even as offers grew, she struggled with doubt. She had always learned quietly, in corners, in imagination. Now people were watching, expecting. The transition from secret practice to public attention was harder than she thought. She worried she might lose something precious, the raw honesty in her playing that had touched people so deeply. Music, for her, had always been about feeling. Not notes, not applause, just feeling. Could she keep that if she learned to play formally, if she tried to meet others' expectations? Her mother encouraged her carefully. "Learn what you can, but don't forget why you play," she said. Those words became her guide. The lessons began slowly, focusing on technique, posture, and theory, but always circling back to emotion. The musician reminded her that skill could support feeling, not replace it. Each session felt different from anything she had experienced before. The piano at home was imagined, the piano in the cafe had been real, but now the piano in the lessons was a tool. It was still hers, still a place where music could live, but it was also teaching her that talent could grow without losing its essence. Word of her story spread further. Local newspapers mentioned her, not as a celebrity, but as a young girl with extraordinary skill and an unusual beginning. People were fascinated not just by the music, but by the courage it had taken to ask for a chance in the first place. Strangers began offering small support. Some sent used instruments, some shared music books, and some simply left kind notes online. The world felt larger, more connected because of her music. She had never expected that something so small, like a simple request for food, could ripple outward into such attention. Despite the growing recognition, she kept her routines small. Mornings were still quiet, walks through familiar streets, visits to the cafe now sometimes to practice or meet someone who wanted guidance. She learned to navigate public attention carefully, staying true to herself while exploring new opportunities. It was not always easy. Some days were filled with doubt. She wondered if her music would still carry the honesty it always had, or if people would only see skill and ignore the feeling behind it. But every time she returned to the keys, she remembered the first moment she played for a piece of food, and that memory anchored her. Friends she had grown up with noticed the change too. They were curious but careful, some afraid of being left behind. She continued to spend time with them, sharing small moments, laughing at ordinary jokes, walking through streets that had always been hers. Music was now a part of her life, but it did not define everything. She learned to balance attention and friendship, practice and play, learning and imagination. Each day added layers to her understanding of the world and her place in it. The musician who guided her became a quiet mentor, never overbearing, always encouraging. They showed her how to play more complicated pieces, how to express subtle emotions through small movements, how to listen as much as to press keys. Lessons extended beyond technique. They spoke about life, patience, and the way music could connect people in ways words could not. She absorbed all of it, not as instruction alone, but as understanding. Each lesson strengthened her skill but also deepened her appreciation for what music could do. Her performances, small and informal at first, grew gradually. Local events, small gatherings, occasional school functions, always keeping the focus on honesty, on feeling. She refused to turn music into spectacle. That decision shaped her reputation. People respected her not only for her talent but for the humility and authenticity she carried. Every note played was a reminder that the power of music came from emotion, not applause. As her story became more widely known, she started to inspire others. Children who had never considered music, people who had given up on learning something new, those struggling in silence, all felt a connection. Her story showed that talent could exist anywhere, often unnoticed, waiting for a chance. She became a quiet symbol of courage and persistence, not through loud fame, but through the example of honesty and resilience. At home, evenings remained simple. She practiced, wrote down observations, sometimes helped her mother with chores, and always carried a quiet hope that music could continue to exist without compromise. The lessons she learned extended beyond notes and keys. They taught her patience, understanding, humility, and the importance of listening, to herself, to others, and to the world. That growth was slower than recognition but more lasting. Occasionally, she returned to the cafe where it all began. The staff and customers greeted her warmly, remembering the day she had asked to play for a piece of food. Some laughed now at the memory, some told the story to new visitors, and some just listened quietly as she played. The piano there, though ordinary, held a memory that no fame could replace. It reminded her why she started, why she persisted, and why music had always mattered more than anything else. Through it all, she learned something essential, that talent and opportunity alone were not enough. Courage, honesty, and the willingness to take a chance mattered just as much. The simple act of asking to play for a piece of food had opened doors, not because people were forced to notice, but because she had been brave enough to show herself, fully and without apology. That bravery became the foundation for everything that followed, stronger than applause, more lasting than recognition. Her story continued quietly, growing in layers. It was no longer just about hunger or skill. It was about persistence, the unseen efforts that shape a person, and the impact that honesty can have when shared with others. Each day she played, learned, and inspired. Each day, she remembered the morning when she asked a cafe to let her perform for a piece of food, unaware that the world would stop and listen. That moment had become a turning point, not only in her life but in the lives of those who witnessed it. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest request can change everything. The attention she received was exciting at first, almost dizzying. People wanted to meet her, to hear her play, to tell her how amazing she was. Offers arrived from local schools, music teachers, and even small event organizers. But with each invitation, a strange feeling grew inside her, a mix of fear and doubt. She had learned in quiet corners, in secret moments stolen from life. Now the world was watching. Every note, every pause, every movement was noticed. She began to wonder if she could keep the honesty in her music, or if it would be swallowed by expectations. The first few public performances were nerve-wracking. She practiced as usual, but the presence of strangers added a weight she had never felt. Some days, her fingers trembled, and she made mistakes she knew she would never have made alone. She looked out at the audience and felt a strange disconnect. They watched, they clapped, they praised, but she questioned if they truly understood the music, the story behind each note, or if they simply saw skill on display. That gap between intention and perception haunted her. Her mother noticed the change. She had always worried about her daughter's physical well-being, but now she watched the emotional strain. She tried to offer gentle advice. "Remember why you play," she said one evening, sitting beside her. "The world may want to see perfection, but what matters is truth. Let them hear your heart, not just your hands." Those words became a quiet mantra. She carried them into each performance, trying to remind herself that the music was hers first, the audience second. The local musician who had first offered guidance remained a steady presence. They encouraged her to experiment, to play pieces that challenged her, and to trust her instincts. "Technique is important," they said, "but emotion is everything. If you lose that, you lose the music." Each lesson was a careful balance of skill building and heart training. She practiced scales, studied rhythm, and learned about harmony, but she also focused on the feelings behind the notes. Music was no longer just a secret escape. It was becoming a language she could shape deliberately, with intention and depth. Despite the growing skill, doubts continued to creep in. She compared herself to trained students, people who had years of formal education. Sometimes she felt inadequate, believing that her learning in hidden corners could never match theirs. Yet when she played for her own practice, for the moments alone, she realized that her secret approach gave her something formal lessons could not: a raw connection to emotion, an instinctive understanding of sound and feeling that came from living through struggle. That was her strength, and she clung to it. As public performances increased, she faced moments of pressure she had never imagined. Event organizers asked for specific songs, audiences requested favorites, and people expected flawless execution. The music began to feel like a performance in the literal sense, something to meet standards rather than a story to tell. Some evenings, after playing for a crowd, she would return home exhausted, not just physically but emotionally, worrying that she had lost the part of herself that had made the music special. She began to understand the delicate balance between opportunity and authenticity, and it was not easy to maintain. Small victories reminded her why she continued. A child in the audience would watch her with wide eyes, clearly moved. An older listener would quietly nod, tears forming, as if understanding a pain they could not explain. These moments reaffirmed that music could still connect with hearts, even amidst expectations and pressure. The challenge was learning to navigate the world without letting it change the essence of her playing. Her mother continued to provide quiet support, offering perspective when the world seemed overwhelming. She reminded her that recognition was fleeting, but the truth in her music was enduring. They shared simple evenings at home, where she would play freely without an audience, without expectation. Those moments were sacred, grounding her, reminding her that despite fame or attention, the music began and ended with her own expression. Even as invitations grew, she remained selective. She performed at local gatherings, community events, and occasional small concerts. She refused opportunities that felt exploitative or overly commercialized. Her focus was not on applause or recognition, but on maintaining the purity of her music. That careful approach earned her respect from those who understood, though it occasionally caused friction with people who saw potential for publicity. She learned to navigate politely, keeping her boundaries while continuing to grow. During this period, she also encountered skeptics, people who questioned her background, her talent, or her motivations. Some suggested she had received secret lessons. Others claimed her story was exaggerated. She faced these moments quietly, without confrontation. Instead, she let her music speak. Each note, each performance was proof. Her humility and dedication became part of her message, showing that talent combined with honesty carried more weight than argument or explanation. Her learning also became more creative. She experimented with new pieces, composed small melodies, and explored improvisation. She discovered that her imagination, shaped by years of secret practice, gave her a unique voice. Other students might play perfectly, but they did not carry the same lived experience behind their music. That experience gave her playing depth and authenticity. She realized that doubt, struggle, and hunger had shaped her abilities as much as formal practice ever could. Friendships also became part of her life again. Childhood friends, curious but cautious, offered support and perspective. They reminded her of the streets where she had grown up, the small joys and simple moments that had grounded her. They laughed with her, shared meals, and listened without judgment. These human connections provided a balance to the public attention, keeping her life connected to ordinary experiences, even as her talent took her into extraordinary spaces. The musician mentor continued to guide her carefully. They pushed her to explore subtlety, to understand silence as much as sound, and to trust intuition over rigid rules. Each lesson was a dialogue, a way to refine skill without compromising emotion. She learned to see music as a living language, capable of expressing everything from joy to pain, from quiet moments to grand intensity. That understanding became the foundation for her growing reputation as a player who could touch hearts, not just impress with speed or technical skill. One day, she was invited to perform at a small recital. The audience included other students, teachers, and parents. She felt the familiar weight of expectation, the creeping fear that she might falter or lose the truth in her playing. But she remembered the cafe, the moment when she had first played for a piece of food, and the courage it had taken. That memory anchored her. She began to play, letting each note emerge naturally, carrying the same honesty that had always guided her. The audience listened quietly, many moved deeply, sensing that this music came from experience, not merely technique. Over time, she developed resilience. Doubts remained, but she learned to work through them, to embrace imperfection as part of her humanity. She realized that pressure was inevitable in any pursuit, but the ability to maintain authenticity in the face of expectation was a rare skill. That skill, combined with her natural talent and continued practice, became her true strength. She discovered that success was not measured by applause alone, but by the capacity to stay true to herself while sharing her gift with others. Her story inspired quietly. People who heard her music began to understand that talent alone was not enough. Courage, authenticity, and persistence mattered just as much. The girl who had once asked to play for a piece of food now taught others, indirectly, that honesty and humility could create a resonance far beyond recognition. Her life became an example not of easy success, but of careful, persistent growth. A reminder that every step, every struggle, every choice shaped the person she was becoming. Even as opportunities expanded, she maintained balance. Music remained a source of comfort and expression, not obligation. Lessons continued, performances occurred, and her skill grew, but she always returned to the simple moments. A quiet morning at home, an impromptu melody for a friend, the soft sound of keys beneath her fingers without expectation. Those moments preserved her connection to the origin of her journey, the courage it had taken to ask for a chance, and the deep satisfaction of expressing her own story through music. Through all the challenges, she learned to trust herself. The doubts, the pressure, the expectations, they were part of life, but they did not define her. Her talent had begun in secret, shaped by hunger and imagination, and it grew through persistence and courage. Each performance, each lesson, each moment of doubt overcome became part of a larger story. A story not just about music, but about resilience, honesty, and the quiet strength that comes from staying true to oneself even as the world watches. By the time she returned to the cafe, the place felt different, though it had not changed much at all. The worn tables, the familiar smell of coffee, and the soft morning light were the same, but the memories in her mind made the space feel larger, almost alive. She remembered the first time she had stepped in, asking for a piece of food in exchange for music. The laughter that had greeted her request, the nervous excitement of sitting at the piano, the silence that had followed the first notes, all of it lingered. Today, she walked in not as a girl hoping for recognition, but as someone who had earned it through persistence, honesty, and talent. The staff greeted her warmly. Some remembered the first day vividly, their initial amusement replaced by genuine respect. Others had heard the stories through visitors or online, amazed at the journey she had undertaken. A small crowd had already gathered, curious to hear her play, though she was not performing out of obligation. She had come to share her music, not to impress. The piano awaited, familiar and comforting, a companion in her growth and struggles. She sat down slowly, taking a moment to feel the keys beneath her fingers. The memories of all her previous performances, lessons, and quiet practice sessions came together in that instant. She thought of the countless mornings she had spent imagining music, pressing invisible keys on tables, and dreaming of moments like this. She thought of her mother, of friends who had supported her, and of the people who had once laughed at her request. The journey had been long, filled with doubts and challenges, but it had shaped her, strengthened her, and made her music real. Her fingers moved across the keys, beginning softly, almost cautiously, as if testing the room. Then, with each note, she became bolder. The music flowed naturally, carrying emotion, honesty, and life. She did not play for applause or recognition. She played to express, to share what had always lived inside her. The room responded. Customers, staff, and visitors fell silent, drawn into the story she told through her hands. The sound was familiar to her, yet every performance felt new, shaped by the day, the audience, and the moment. Some people recorded her playing, capturing the notes and the emotion, while others simply listened, letting the music fill them. There was no pressure, no expectation beyond the quiet understanding that music, at its core, was meant to be shared. She had learned to balance attention and authenticity, to let her talent shine without losing the honesty that had first captivated the cafe that morning. Every note reminded her of the courage it had taken to ask for a chance, and every chord carried the resilience that had brought her here. As she played, memories of the past floated in her mind. She thought of the long walks through streets filled with the smell of bread and the sound of distant music, the quiet corners where she had imagined pianos and practiced silently, the early mornings when hunger was her constant companion. Each memory shaped the music she played, infusing it with a depth that could not be taught. The audience sensed it, even if they did not know the full story, and they responded with respect, attention, and quiet awe. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the cafe remained silent for a moment, caught between disbelief and admiration. Then, slowly, applause began, small at first, then growing as more people joined. She smiled softly, acknowledging the moment without seeking the spotlight. The music had spoken, and the audience had listened. The journey from a timid request for food to this shared experience had come full circle, showing her that courage, honesty, and persistence could transform even the smallest opportunity into something extraordinary. After her performance, people approached her not with expectation, but with genuine curiosity and warmth. Some wanted to ask questions, others simply to express gratitude for the music they had heard. She answered softly, politely, never boasting, always grounded in the reality that the journey was ongoing. The recognition was meaningful, but she knew it was not the destination. The music itself, the act of creating and sharing, remained the true reward. Her mother, who had accompanied her quietly, watched with pride. She remembered the first day, the uncertain steps, the timid voice asking to play for food, and the raw talent that had amazed everyone. Now, seeing her daughter confident, grounded, and still connected to her music in the purest way, she felt a sense of relief and joy that was difficult to put into words. She had always believed in her child, but the journey had tested both of them, and the results were more beautiful than either could have imagined. Opportunities continued to arise, but she approached them with care. Invitations to perform at schools, local events, and small concerts came in regularly. She chose carefully, refusing those that felt exploitative or disingenuous. She focused on spaces where her music could connect with hearts, not just entertain. Each choice reinforced her understanding that authenticity mattered more than visibility. She had learned that success was not about being seen by everyone, but about staying true to her own story while sharing her gift. Teaching moments emerged naturally. Children who had watched her play, neighbors, and even strangers sought guidance, curious about her journey and her approach to music. She shared patiently, offering encouragement, demonstrating small techniques, and emphasizing the importance of emotion and honesty. Her story became a quiet inspiration, showing that talent often exists in unexpected places, and that courage, persistence, and authenticity are as vital as skill. Even as her reputation grew, she remained grounded. Mornings were still quiet, walks still reflective, and evenings still dedicated to private practice. She understood that the balance between public attention and private growth was essential. Music was not a performance alone. It was a dialogue with herself, with life, and with anyone willing to listen. The lessons she had learned through struggle, doubt, and persistence guided her, keeping her connected to the essence of why she played. The cafe remained a special place. She returned whenever possible, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude and connection. The staff welcomed her warmly, customers remembered her story, and the piano, worn and familiar, became a symbol of courage, resilience, and opportunity. Each time she played there, it was a reminder of where it all began, and a testament to the journey she had undertaken. The music was the same, yet richer, deeper, imbued with all she had learned and experienced. One day, as she finished a piece, a quiet hush followed. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if understanding the significance of the moment. Then, applause rose, warm and sincere, not for spectacle, but for the shared experience. She smiled, feeling a connection with everyone present. Music had bridged the gap between her world and theirs, between struggle and understanding, between silence and expression. It had created a moment of shared humanity, as powerful as any recognition or reward. Her journey continued beyond the cafe. Lessons, practice, performances, and small victories became part of her life, but she never lost sight of the simple truth that had guided her from the beginning. Courage to ask, honesty to play, and persistence to continue were the constants. Fame, attention, and opportunity were secondary. The music itself, the story she told through it, and the hearts it touched were the real measure of success. Even as the world watched and admired, she remained focused on growth, balance, and authenticity. Each day offered a chance to learn, to connect, and to express. Every performance, whether for one listener or many, became an opportunity to share her story without words. She played not just for recognition, but to honor the journey, the struggles, the lessons, and the hope that had carried her this far. Her story became an example for those who felt unseen, unheard, or overlooked. She showed that talent exists quietly, often hidden, waiting for opportunity and courage to bring it to light. She demonstrated that honesty and authenticity create a resonance that applause alone cannot match. And she reminded the world that small moments, a request for food, a chance to play, can become transformative, shaping not only a life but the hearts of those who witness it. In the end, she understood that the first day in the cafe was not just about hunger or music. It was about courage, persistence, and the willingness to step forward despite uncertainty. It was about the power of sharing a gift, no matter how humble the beginning. And it was about how one small act of bravery can ripple outward, creating change, connection, and recognition in ways that surpass expectation. The journey was ongoing, but the lesson was clear. Honesty, resilience, and love for what one does can turn even the smallest opportunity into something extraordinary.